Hello, full stackers and random people on the internet. We are here tonight with Nimit, my co-founder, co-host, co-friend, and a very special guest, someone who holds a dear spot in my heart, and was the very first full stack instructor. So welcome, Zeke, Zeke Nierenberg. Zeke joined Full Stack in, gosh, when was it? 2014?
2014.
Yeah, 2014. Taught hundreds of students, hundreds of graduates, all know Zeke. And we're really excited to have him here tonight to talk about several topics, how he got into teaching, and then the startup that he built after Full Stack, and tech choices, hiring choices, and then just general career advice on really the founder life, the teaching life. And so welcome, Zeke. I don't know if you want to give a quick introduction to yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Zeke. I'm sort of a lifelong teacher and learner and technologist, and I'm sort of, as the world is getting pretty complicated, I'm trying to figure out how technology can be better in the next 10 years than it was in the last 10 years, and be a force for good in people's lives. And yeah, that's I think that's my shtick.
All right, so Zeke, I think first thing we need to do is be topical. Is like, where are you sheltering in place? Are you sheltering in place? Who are you isolated with? What's your coronavirus project?
My coronavirus project. Yeah. I sewed some masks with my wife, Claire.
Oh, that's touching. That's touching.
We made 4 of them. It took us like 4 hours, and learned a lot about each other, sewing machines.
Was this for donation or just for kind of personal use?
This is for personal use. Maybe we'll do it again for donation, but I mean, 4 masks is not drop in the bucket. But this is for like the grocery store, stuff like that.
Okay.
But yeah, sheltering in place, trying to stay safe at home with our cats.
I see one there behind you.
Yeah, you might see them more. They tend to make appearances on calls.
All right. So Zeke, I love your story. I think let's go back to, you were a CSTA at Hampshire University, right?
Yeah.
Let's say how'd you get into teaching? How'd you find Full Stack too?
Yeah, it's funny. So I got into teaching. I had learning disabilities as a kid. I guess I still have learning disabilities. It was really hard for me to learn how to read. And so teachers every year made a really big difference in my life. A good teacher had an incredible impact on me. And I didn't ever think I wanted to be a teacher as a kid. I don't know what I wanted to be, but that never crossed my mind. But I think learning to code for me was like the first thing that I got to do where it was an intellectual pursuit and I was good at it. And I was encouraged by people around me to keep pursuing it. And so that was like my intellectual salvation from school, which felt really, really hard and I didn't get a lot of traction with. And the first time I ever taught anyone anything, I think, was teaching my mom HTML, because she wanted to make a website for like portfolio work. She's a designer. And
how old were you? Give us some context.
I think I was 13.
Okay.
And she was like, wow, you're like a really good teacher. You break things down. And that surprised me, but I didn't in one moment become a teacher then. I just sort of filed that away. And then in college, I TA'd a class and I really, really liked it. So I kept TAing classes, and one semester I was TAing more classes than I was taking. And then I was like, okay, I actually like teaching. And yeah, I think that's when it sort of started to click. After college, I actually had a startup senior year. And after that, we learned a few things. But I was TAing CS classes. I was an adjunct professor. And I was in Amherst, Massachusetts, which is where Hampshire is. And I was sort of like, there weren't a lot of tech jobs there. And I was asking myself, now that I'm not, in college, like what's something I would really like to do? And I really wanted to teach people software. And so I poked around and I saw on Hacker News you guys had we're hiring. And so I thought, why not? I'll just apply. And I wrote this really long post about how I would teach a class about asynchronicity and concurrency. And
I remember that.
Yeah.
I always love to hear, what was like the first thing you solved with programming that made you feel like, wow, this is a superpower. This is something that, or this is my superpower.
I made a homework helper because I was a very disorganized kid. And so I made this PHP application that you could like make assignments, mark when they were due, put in notes, share them with your classmates. And that was like, people at the time were like, how did you do this? Like, that's crazy. Like, it was mind blowing to my 7th grade peers.
Hey, Zeke, I want to surprise you where one thing we do with all of our guests is they themselves problems on LeetCode live. all right. I jest. No, that sounds. I love.
There wasn't any TI-83 or any TI calculator programming.
No, never.
Okay,
yeah,
that's interesting.
And then, so you found Fullstack, and then you were with Fullstack for what? Almost 3 years, 4 years.
I think just under 3 years.
Just under 3 years. Okay. Any memories? Fond memories? Non-fond memories? Do we ever Yeah.
My interview was memorable.
What? Oh my goodness! What do we do at an interview? We were so young then.
Yeah, you were very young.
Well, hey, even Zeke was very young.
Even Zeke was young. Yeah, we were innocent young men.
Yes, I was very young. What I remember from the interview, you guys had me teach for a day, and you basically like turned over. There was one cohort at once. You turned them over to me, and I walked them through building this thing. And I was very, very impressed with the students. That was something that really stood out to me. They seemed all very smart and interesting. And I'd been teaching as an adjunct college students who were smart and interesting, but on average younger, and also on average not that dedicated to this one class. Like students I had been teaching, my reference point, they had 4 classes they were doing. Some of them were engaged academically, some of them were less engaged academically. And so coming in and having I think the cohort size was something like 15 extremely invested, attentive, smart people was a very different teaching experience.
I remember you telling me that like in your previous college classes at Hampshire, right? That you remember thinking that a lot of students are here just to fulfill like a credit requirement. They haven't really chosen, not everybody here has chosen to be here. And they're not all like really passionate about it. And that was something that stuck out to you. And it was actually really interesting to me when you were actually telling me that after your interview. It was also eye-opening for me. Like, that is something that's very true, that everybody who walks in here is like really there for their own desire, right? Which is very unique compared to any other educational.
Yeah.
Zeke, is there advice you would give to students about how to be successful at a boot camp, looking back on your experience as a teacher?
Well, first, let's define success. Because I think one thing that's interesting about boot camps is that, as opposed to colleges, is that their goal is really economical. Like, it's to get a job, and the economy does well, the economy doesn't do well. And right now, I don't know what advice to give, and I'm very conscious of that no one knows what the world is going to be like in 2 months.
Monday, right? It's like
right. So I don't know if the goal is to get a job. I need to think more carefully about what advice to give. But just in terms of,
let's think back to the good old days of February.
Right. Yeah.
The ancient era. No, I think you're absolutely right. Right, like the economy has changed drastically, so advice does not apply under all situations. But I think maybe just from educational, like you've been inside of a boot camp on the side where you're seeing people. Like, what are people? What are the things that you saw students who did well? What were they doing? Because it's hard to say like what were they what were they from, like, because people can't necessarily change who they are, right?
Yeah.
I think they can only change their behaviors. So I'm curious if you saw behaviors that led to success. That's a question that oftentimes students ask me. I don't know necessarily. I have my answers, but I'm always curious to see what other people think.
Yeah, I think it's all the first thing that comes to mind is like the opposite is like what can trip people up, and sometimes that is getting in your own head about something, or like letting anxieties about how you're doing be an obstacle to your own progress. And everyone has anxieties in life, and you can't just snap a finger and have them disappear. But focusing on your change, like I was super confused yesterday. I'm actually a lot less confused today. Still confused, but that's a pretty big difference from yesterday when I had no idea what was going on. That people who focus on the delta from day to day and like controlling what they can control, as opposed to where they think they should be, or the mental model they have of what success looks like. I think it's better to put one foot in front of the other and focus on kind of your own progress in a very granular way.
Zeke, I always want to get some shout outs. We have one from Tong. We have one from you. I'm sure you remember Tong.
Oh yeah,
we have
yeah.
one from Andrew.
Yeah.
I think he mostly referring to you there. We have one from Nirmohi. Wow, so you're a lot of love for Zeke in the comments. Yeah, Andrew makes a great point, that imposter syndrome of not feeling like you're making the progress that you need to be making, and that focusing on that instead of and then I think one thing is amazing is that you led the build out of the third version of the Fullstack, the third iteration of the Fullstack Learn.lms. Oops, I can't say technically our learning management system that's not officially named Learn. And it's still, I don't know if you know, it's still running today, servicing I think thousands of concurrent users simultaneously.
Someone told me that it was still running, and I was very surprised. But
yeah, I remember Zeke
keeping it up. Griffin's keeping it up.
That's amazing.
I remember Zeke, you came to us and you're like, there's going to be this thing called actions, and they're going to be on cards, and the cards are going to be, and then and today, what's funny is that programmers, when you name things, people tend to, you're able to shape the vocabulary that people think about their world in by the names you give things. And so now we still call learn.pages like, oh, the action that I'm about to take.
It's so funny you remember the cards. I remember
cards.
the cards. Yeah.
I remember that, because I was like
Jerry, what? Levels.
I feel like if I look back like on the software I wrote a year ago, I feel like it's terrible. Software I wrote 3 years ago is terrible. Software I wrote 5 years ago is terrible. Like there's this perceived exponential growth in like quality. I think some of it is some kind of bias, but when I think back to Learn. I'm impressed that Griffin has been able to maintain it. I imagine he's rewritten a lot of it.
Yeah.
I think we've changed a lot of it to, it's funny, what I've heard it called the strangler pattern, where you strangle the old system with the new system, and you don't, because you can't afford to do the rewrite. So you kind of kill the old system and the new. And it's actually been interesting because we have, for example, Angular, I don't even know what they call them anymore, scopes, right? That will then load React controllers that load Angular scopes. So it's kind of like different components rebuilt with React. So we've been doing that process. I don't know if you remember, we had another fellow, Ayana. She introduced this thing called JS data. So I think we wrapped that with something called FS data, and that's been wrapped again with some other, fetch libraries. So I think the core pieces you built, though, the core ideas have stayed very solid throughout. And so the technical stuff has changed, but the core stuff has. People love actions. We have to explain to people what concepts, actions, and cards are all about, but they get it pretty quickly. Let's see. Whoa, we have Pete Deeds, 1501 Flex.
That's the first Flex cohort.
Man, this is great to see all these full stack Hall of Famers.
Yeah,
really brings back some good times. So we'll talk about post full stack. I don't want to hear what I don't want to hear what happened between you and Nimit that made you decide to look at other. No, I want to hear about your post full stack. So maybe tell us a story about like how you decided to do a startup, because it's a big decision. What that startup was focused on, and how you got started.
Yeah, I mean, let's see. I like the beginnings of things. I think I'm drawn to how flexible things are and how, like malleable things are. I had a friend that I'd always sort of thought had the potential to be a great founder. He was pitching me on a logistics startup. I knew nothing about logistics, and he was pitching me for a while, and it felt in my head, there was a switch that flipped from when it felt like, sure, you can pitch me on your startup, but like, I'm not going to do a startup with you, to like, oh, maybe I will do a startup with you. And that was like overnight. And
well, you know how it started, Zeke. Like the I remember that you were doing tutoring sessions for a while, teaching him how to code.
Yeah.
Right? And I always remember whenever that was going on, I always looked at David. I'm like, this is a great recruitment tactic. David's like, yeah, it's just a matter of time.
Really, that's interesting. Yeah. And so the other thing is I'd done a startup. I did a startup in college, and we had a lot of trouble finding customers. We had a lot of trouble figuring out what our product was. We sort of built this cool tool that was in search of a problem, and we couldn't figure out how to articulate it in such a way that we could get anyone to use it. So one of the things that tipped the scales a little bit is that my then co-founder said, I've got us a customer in California. Let's fly out there and do a hackathon and build the product. And I was like, whoa, like you got a customer.
That's cool. Yeah.
We never had a customer in my last thing. So, and that weekend was a lot of fun. We built this little dinky prototype, and the customer said they'd be a real customer. It turned out they never were, but the meeting went really well. And so, and then he was able to raise money, and like he was sort of telling me that the investors were in if I was or something, and like he was telling the investors the opposite. So so I learned that later, but he
that's some real Silicon Valley shit right there.
Yeah. But
I'm talking about the show.
Yeah. But he sort of like was able to like almost like a kid on a swing, like build momentum. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
We might have lost David.
I think he's probably fixing his hair, if I know David.
Sorry, it was
you asked also what it was too.
Yeah.
It was a logistics tech company, so it was a freight brokerage, and we operated for 3 years, around 3 years, and the company ended up dying, and it was actually very traumatic. Like I think probably usually is when startups fail, but it was, the whole experience left me with a lot of like in the future, I think I'm just going to be a lot more careful about getting into situations. I think it's easy. One of the things I like about startups is that they're so malleable at the beginning, but it also leads you to think that there aren't necessarily consequences, or that when something's like a baby, it's hard to imagine that it could grow up and like be something that is consequential, I guess, in a good way or a bad way.
Well,
But one thing I always
you're
say,
doing a startup again, right? Which shows me that like at least you it was difficult, but it didn't you still have the bug to some sort. Like you learned a lot of lessons, and
Yeah.
you like what doesn't kill you, makes you stronger. It feels a little bit like you got stronger.
but see, one
Time
thing
will
I
tell.
tell people is like I never like startups are like kids. I never recommend it, but I enjoy it. I enjoy the process, but I would never recommend it to anyone. I'm curious, like, do you a lot of people, who are in tech oftentimes have that startup dream. How like, and I feel like they keep it in this. How do you know when it's the right time to jump from that dream into doing it? And then I'd love to hear your thoughts on like what are the things that you think, what are the mistakes that you made that you think all early startup founders are liable to make, are likely to make?
Yeah. I think the jumping in, I think a lot of it, I mean, some of it just has to do with opportunity and privilege. Like if you are in a life position where you can, and something presents itself, like someone coming to you who you know and respect who has an idea, or like your own idea, or maybe you're building this thing for yourself and you find it to be way better than the status quo and you want to let other people use it. I think this might not be true for everyone, but I don't think you should have your mind set on, I'm going to start a company this month. You should more be like looking for opportunities. And when you see something present itself and you're capable, which is just not always true, then you should pounce on that opportunity. If you want all the things that can come with it, which is, I don't think it's for everyone. And I don't think people should romanticize it or sort of talk themselves into it if they have reservations.
All right. So I mean, I don't know if that'd be easy for you to anonymize it to the startup, but what were some of the mistakes that you made that you think, looking back on, you're like, that was something that I would never have seen coming, but was obvious in hindsight? Or just maybe what are some of the mistakes you made? I feel like,
I think that all the founders should have a certain degree of relationship with the investors. I didn't have a relationship to our investors until the end. I think that you have to figure out a way to talk about downside scenarios without obsessing over them. I tend to obsess over like bad things that could happen, and that's not always productive. But my co-founder and I didn't have a great way to talk productively about, talk effectively about, like, what if this deal doesn't go through? What if this doesn't happen? And I think getting good at having those kinds of conversations before you need to, because there can be a lot of interpersonal debugging that can take a lot of time, and you just don't have time when things are falling apart to figure out your interpersonal stuff. Let
me ask you, I think that's one thing I struggle a lot with is transparency as a founder, because one book I love is Sapiens. Have you read it?
I've heard about that. I have not read it.
But I think his key thesis, and I'm gonna totally butcher it, is that humans are able to build civilization because we're able to believe in fictions, right? Like we're able to believe in religions and monies and the idea of money, right? The idea of nation state, right? The nation state is only 400 years old, right? And so, the idea of a country. So we believe these stories, and that's what lets us work with each other beyond the level of kin or tribe, right?
Sure.
So that's his thesis, and I really love that. How important that is for startup life, that we believe the story. Now, a startup is one thing I think Naval said I like is a company is nothing but a nexus of contracts, right? Labor contracts, lease contracts, IP contracts, and so it's so thin of a story, and then the founders owned creating and managing that story, and so oftentimes I wonder if the best ones are also they told themselves the story so strongly they can't even live outside that story. I think I often think of like Adam Neumann, right? The whole time he must have, did he have reservations? or was he so into the story that he couldn't even show them? So I'm curious for you, like if you're the kind of opposite, you're like, you see the cracks in every story. How did you manage that energy at the startup when your staff are looking to you and saying, hey, what's the story here?
Yeah, I think it's different. There's a difference between staff and the leadership team, but I think knowing your own starting point, knowing your own biases is important, because and sort of figuring out how to see the space between things, or like see the things you don't usually see, like your own cognition, can be really useful. I think you have to believe in your teammates and, cross your fingers. Like when you have doubts, you have to sort of say, this is my team member and, this is their job right now. And I'm going to back, if it's their domain, like their decision, I'm going to, if I'm nervous about something or if I disagree with the direction, I'm going to stand behind it. And it's, it doesn't always go well.
Yeah.
I think you have to do that. It's the only way to be successful, but it can end terribly. So it's not like, that's not a recipe for success. That's necessary, but not sufficient for success.
Yeah. I think the people who say that, look, startups are all built on hard work and smarts, and then the counter by people who say it's built on just luck. Obviously both sides I think are incorrect, right? It's a combination of all of those things, right? A lot of hard work and smart people build stuff and just get, like now I'm imagining it's happening. A lot of startups probably going to not survive this. I imagine coronavirus is terrible for someone who's always seen the downside of the future. How are you coping with your anxiety levels around this general time in the world?
Well, I think I was always like a week ahead of Twitter's anxiety level. Like, I don't know, like, I was like,
so you've reached the apex already?
No, I wish.
Mentally,
you're done. It's like end of the lockdown.
We're still getting there, Zeke.
No, I mean, it is hard, and it's funny. Like, what you were saying about narratives or things we tell ourselves about the future, I feel like I have the least visibility into what I think the future is that I've ever had. And the cone of possibilities is so massive that it's hard to know how to plan things or like think about the summer.
From your startup perspective, Zeke, like I hear a lot of people say, and I also hear from a lot of investors that, hey, in the last recession actually birthed a whole generation of great new companies. And I think, as painful as it is for the people who are living through it, it actually, scarcity forces a different kind of innovation as well. Like, are you guys seeing that at the current project? And I don't want to give anything away. I know you're keeping it stealth right now, but are you guys seeing that kind of feeling where you're starting to really think more deeply about, hey, can we make the amount of money we have last longer than we were planning to even a month ago?
Yeah, I think first broadly, I imagine that is absolutely true. If you think about the companies that started in 2008 and 2009, like there's a lot of them, like Airbnb, many others. I think adding some constraints to the system can shake out some of the bullshit and like the optics and like make people focus on doing something that actually adds value, which is like probably a good, pressure anyways. I'm sure conversely, there's also companies that would have been successful in another funding environment and just couldn't make it happen. But I think the constraint is probably helpful. We are definitely thinking about how to make money last longer. And I think we're building a product for worker voice and to give power to workers. And so we're absolutely like, aren't really ready to launch, but we're going to be launching in a few weeks because
It's probably a good time for that.
Yeah, and I mean, like we're product market fit. We're not even sure if what we're building will be useful to people, but I think if we can be useful to people right now, this is a time to get out there and be useful.
Try it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you have, if I read about the history of labor, the one interesting thing that always like stuck in my mind was that the early strength of or the switch from feudal economies to, I would say, kind of stronger peasant rights. I mean, we're so far from peasantry, but the first rise of peasant rights and kind of civilian rights was the Black Plague, because it decimated the labor pool, and so it's like the peasants of the serfs had a lot more say in how things were run because they were just needed. Because if I'm a lord of one, I don't even know what the term is, but if I'm a lord of one estate, I need people to run my agriculture. I'm gonna have to pay more than that other person because there's not enough people. So I'm curious if you think how coronavirus plays out. I don't think it's not a same dynamic, right? We're in a very different world than feudal.
Yeah,
I mean, I actually think
I hope so. I don't think.
Go ahead.
I don't think we'll get to a situation where so many people die that the labor market shifts like that. That would be just a tragedy of epic proportions.
Even this morning we saw like 6 million unemployment claims, right? So the labor market is being decimated. Or not decimated, but it's being ravaged.
Yeah.
Dave, on your point, I think that even though it's not directly like the Black Plague, where I think in that case, like a third of Europe got wiped out over like 50 years or something. Like I think a lot of people don't even realize about that there were like 5 or 6 different resurgences of it, like aftershocks of the Black Plague. But I think here what will happen is, if you all remember Thomas Friedman's "The World is Flat" book, where I just think that this whole remote work idea, where everybody is suddenly learning, each company is being dragged, forced to learn how to deal with remote workers better, and to build systems and structures that actually allow that. It will actually give access to high quality work and highly paid work to people who today are not living in these like big cities where they actually have easy access to that type of work. And so I think it may actually make it a lot more. I mean, I would just say it just equalizes the opportunity to good work to a lot more people around the world. Because companies will welcome remote work more, and companies will be open to hiring people from all over the world rather than just around their local area. And so I think that
I hope so. I think like that would be great. I feel like that is very possible when we come out the other side of it. To me, like if someone had a crystal ball and told me that in a few weeks things are going to start getting better and things will bounce back in the fall, I believe them. But if someone told me that we're going to be feeling the shockwaves of this economically for 10 years, I'd also believe them. And I think when we come out the other side, however we do, I'm sure people will have figured out how to remote work a little bit better, and it'll be a little more commonplace, and that will definitely be good for people who maybe couldn't relocate to a city or didn't want to relocate to a big city to, let's say, be a software engineer.
Or even like internationally, right? Like there's a lot of people who are in, there's also artificial kind of immigration restrictions that countries have with each other that make it impossible to, and I bet there's a good opportunity there also in terms of startups to like make it easier for people to hire remote workers, in other, right now it's and just speaking as somebody who's, we've tried to do that, it is really difficult right now to hire full-time workers in other countries. Like like these big companies do it, but they just take on massive legal costs up front. But if you just like a small company wants to hire like 2 full-time people, unless you're hiring them as contractors or through a consulting company, it's tough. But anyway, that aside, hopefully, thankfully, not the Black Plague. So just close that out.
It's funny. I joined these sessions with Nimit just to get our minds off the world, and here we are chatting about it. Let's do move on to let's talk about tech.
Yeah.
I'd love to get your thoughts on the tech you used at your previous company. And I'm sure you still do a lot of development as head of technology, or at least make a lot of technology choices. What are you seeing as kind of like, what are you excited about? I think like what's kind of your core technology stack? What are you excited about? Where do you think things are going?
Yeah. Well, I'm not in the business of making predictions, but I will say that I'm really loving GraphQL, loving TypeScript, using something called Nest, which is a sort of modern Node TypeScript framework, really liking. It looks actually a lot like modern Angular. It's the same dependency injection stuff. It has a really good testing philosophy because you can just inject some service. And, yeah, exactly. Been loving
Nest
that.
Nest is a what are the choices that Nest is making for somebody?
They it's very opinionated. They have a GraphQL system and then a REST system, and you can they have all these different decorators. If you want to make a route, you'd have a controller and you'd decorate it with a post method. Decorate a certain method in your controller with a post decorator, and the way you'd make a GraphQL resolver or query or mutation is all with these decorators. And they don't have a specific ORM they plug into, but they work really nicely with type ORM, which is what we're using. And it's the polar opposite of how my last company worked, because it's like an opinionated, strong framework that has a way of doing something. You just have to learn the way to do it, and then you do it. You don't invent the wheel ever. It's applying the wheel.
No, I often think like what, like why the Node.js world never had like the Rails solution.
Right.
I mean, it had Express.js, right? It kind of had the Sinatra solution from the Ruby world. I'm curious to get your thoughts on maybe that question itself. And then do you feel like Nest is trying to be like that conventional configuration answer server side? And I'm guessing if it's server side built, it's server side with like client side. I don't know if they use the term hydration, but built like the client side is built in React, or is that? Is that not how it works?
It doesn't really know anything about the client, so I guess you could.
It's not client based.
Yeah. You might be able to configure it to do that. People have configured it to do lots of things, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, there was something called Sales.js, which I think is still around, and that was trying to be Rails in Node.js. I think that had some traction, but I don't remember I remember on the internet there was some drama between the maintainers or something. There's some GitHub issue that had like 1 million replies and a lot of drama, and I don't know if I don't know what happened to that project, but I think Nest is sort of trying to be that thing. I don't know. It seems popular enough, but I have no idea if it's like going to be the equivalent to Rails.
So you're saying your previous startup was kind of like start an Express app, built from there, and this is very,
yeah. Do you know this is really funny. The initial commit for our company was at that hackathon, and at the time, there was this repo at Fullstack called Bones, I think.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! That was the foundation of my last company's tech stack, and I never even like. I wasn't making.
You should have told us that, Zeke, because now we own the IP.
Now we own your company
code base.
You can have it.
You can have it.
But like we started that as a hackathon and like never made the decision to transition. Like never thought about like, oh, what should our tech stack be? It was just like we got to get up and running and like let's throw things together. And that if you never clean that up as a sort of cascading effect throughout your code base. So it's been nice to have learned from that and be a little more patient with decision making, think a little more strategically about when to take on tech debt, in what way, for what purpose. Yeah.
I have a pretty strong inclination that like TypeScript is here to stay. It solves all the right problems in the right way. GraphQL, I feel like maybe because the adoption is a little bit heavier. It doesn't seem to me to have the same, like, this is the right way to do things versus like GraphQL, I guess, versus like kind of traditional REST or even RPC type solutions. I'm curious, like if you think like what your stance on the maturity of GraphQL is. Like, I guess would you agree with this comment? If you're starting a startup right now, or if you're starting a new technology, if you're starting a new web-based technology or client server-based technology, not using GraphQL would be insanity.
I would almost agree with that. It's like, I don't know. I think it's like it solves a lot of problems, and it adds a lot of certainty to your development and a lot of like flexibility.
Yeah.
I don't know about insanity, but I think like I chose to use it. I wouldn't go back. Yeah.
And then, your last company, you were using like AI type stuff. Like, is there any AI component to this company, or is this?
No. And, honestly, the last company, like AI is like a pretty loaded term. It was an automation company, and it was trying to remove rote work, but we weren't
using ML or using.
I mean, we were, but it was out of the box stuff. It wasn't like we were using some NLP stuff, but we weren't making new AI.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of AI companies who are, I think what's that Gary Tan joke, right? Like the scale of AI, the spectrum of AI companies, there's like lots of if statements out of the box, deep learning, right? And most companies I would say are in that first two buckets. Very few companies have the resources to support.
Yeah.
Development on the third stage. It's an expensive process.
Yeah, I think most like AI companies are linear regression. That's their model.
All right, and Zeke, I'd love to get your thoughts on just general career advice for people who are, looking at, or maybe you can think about it as an age specific, people who are looking to start companies, people who are looking to get into programming. I think there's different demographics that you can talk to. Curious things that still resonate with you or resonate strongly with you as working in your career.
Yeah, so I think looking to get into programming, I think there's the first thing I think about is, do you already know if you like programming? Because you can like be interested in getting into programming because your roommate's a software engineer and you want to you think that might be cool, or you can be looking to get into it because you got exposed to it somehow, you caught the bug, and like you just really you realize you like this thing a lot more than your day job. Like I know a lot of full stackers I talked to early on were like, they learned how to code at work because they needed to solve a problem, or it was for a specific project. They were doing a ton of complex stuff in Excel or something like that. And then they realized they actually liked that part. That project was over, and they realized they liked that part of their job so much more than the rest of their job that they wanted to figure out a way to become a programmer. So I would say if you like the idea of programming, the best thing you can do is find out as efficiently as possible if you like it, because it's not actually for everyone. I think it could be for anyone. Almost anyone. I don't think it's like there's people who can do it and people who can't do it at all. But I don't think everyone will find it fulfilling or interesting or fun, or I don't think it's necessarily a good idea that everyone should learn to code. But if you're interested in maybe learning to code, I think the best thing you can do is quickly figure out if you actually like it. And less importantly, if you're good at it, because that is something that's much harder to figure out and has a lot more to do with your own psyche. So, more about like, if you like solving the problems, because you like it, that will fuel you to become good at it. If you like it.
Do you buy at all into this kind of premise that we live in it's like a literacy type thing of being able to manipulate computers to your will? And because I often hear a few things, right? One is computational thinking, and the other one is digital literacy. And while I agree that those are separate things from programming, software development, and computer science, all distinct domains, right? Programming seems to me like the best proxy for having computational thinking and digital literacy, right? Now, I know people who would never consider themselves programmers, but what they can do in Excel is basically computational thinking, right? So I think I agree. I think all those domains are separate. But do you think we are do you buy into the statement that we're in this exponential growth area powered by several things, right? Energy, Moore's law, internet connectivity. And to participate in some of those things, you have to be digital literate, and the best proxy is programming. Or maybe dismantle the whole thing for me. Dismantle the whole thing.
Lack of digital literacy, accessibility, computational thinking is holding a lot of people back. And it's not always like the people you think. Like, I had this internship at this Harvard teaching hospital, and we were doing research in the emergency department. And the way they set up their schema, essentially, in a Google Sheet was crazy. Like, it just didn't make any sense. And it was leading to not gathering all the right information in a way that would be impossible to come back from. And so the way the research was done, again, at like a very reputable institution, was opening the clinical record system, writing down some information on paper, walking it over to a totally unnetworked computer, and like typing it in Excel, and typing it in Excel in a way that made it very hard to analyze. So, and then I'm sure that it was sent to like their statistician colleagues, who transformed it into a system that could be analyzed very painstakingly. So I think that lack of computational thinking is holding a ton of people back in a ton of different areas. And certainly, like, there's a lot of people who don't have access or to be even exposed to computational thinking. But I think there's a lot of people who, if there was really high quality CS or programming, computational education in high school, a lot of people would get a lot out of that. I don't think it's quite like literacy in terms of the scale, the power of the technology, but
needed.
Yeah, I think society would be very different if in the United States we had 15% literacy. I think it would just be totally different society. I don't think the same implications are necessarily true, but I do think there's a tremendous amount of potential energy that's being pent up because there's a bottleneck of people who have computational thinking.
Zeke, for the benefit of possibly some people who are watching who are early in their developer journey, or maybe recently graduated and looking for a position, if you're hiring a entry-level developer, whenever next you do, what are some of the things that you're looking for? Maybe if you just label them as like the top 3 things that you look for, and then you use that list also as a way to tell the listeners, like, this is what you should focus on to get a job.
Yeah, I think as a startup, it's interesting. It's probably different than at other companies. I'm not sure there is one list, but for when I think about it, I think about, honestly, this might be true with any engineer, not just an entry-level engineer, but comfort with ambiguity. Because in our environment, we're still figuring out what our product is. We don't have fully thought out user stories and a product manager. We do have a designer, which is a luxury, but but someone who's willing to sort of live with gray areas and embrace tricky trade-offs and think through things. And I do think that some more senior level people have more experience doing that, but it's not necessarily something that is just for people who've been around the block, because you can have 10 years of career experience but have never had to weigh those trade-offs because you work in environments that provide a lot more certainty. So I think probably the number one thing I look for is comfort with ambiguity and comfort with being a little bit cross-disciplinary.
I see. I guess that's where the term full stack developer kind of comes from, right? So to be comfortable, and I guess comfortable is a generic word, but to have good instincts in areas other than just like what line of code to write next, be able to make good product decisions.
Yeah.
What else? Anything else?
I think there's something about like showing the ability, I think this is more for junior people, showing the ability to ramp on something really quickly and get excited about it. So one thing that I've seen with some full stack alums or full stack students when I was there is like, I got really excited about this technology, learned a ton about it, made a pull request, and like, I'm now a contributor to this thing. And like, maybe the pull request is on this tiny little area of the project, but like showing the ability to get excited about something, to immerse yourself in it, and then have that be your little thing that you're into, like that's like your hobby for a bit, it is. And I'm not trying to say that everyone needs to be coding on the weekends all the time or something, but like that is something that to me is a strong signal that you'll be able to do the same thing with our repo. You'll be able to, you know, ramp up quickly, be excited, be an evangelist for something. Yeah.
Okay, cool. You hiring anyone anytime soon?
Not right now. Yeah.
Can we put you down for a job? Just kidding.
All right, Zeke. I'd love to do a lightning round of hot seat with you. And
Okay.
For those in the audience, if you have questions, feel free to post them in the comments. Otherwise, I have a bunch of questions I love asking. Let's see if this works. Oh yeah.
Nice.
All right, that's too much. That's too much. No, I like it. Yeah. Okay. All right. I don't know why this question became popular, but I'm sure you've thought about it before. If you could have animals for hands, what would they be?
Man, I should have thought of that. I've heard that question before. I really like cats. I'm just gonna go with cats. I think they'd be a little bit chaotic, but
it's totally useless answer. Okay.
There's a why to it also. Dave.
Yeah. Why?
It's not just what.
Okay. Why?
I don't know. I spend a lot of time these days with my two cats, and they provide me a lot of joy and contentment. And I think I'd get to know those
time.
Just carry them along everywhere. It's good.
All right. What fictional world would you live in? So it could be like Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, some future. I don't know.
Star Trek.
Romancer.
Star Trek. Love Star Trek.
That's a good one. What character from The Office would best exist in your Star Trek world?
Probably Dwight. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's a good answer. Dwight. Dwight and
because Dwight would be so
position?
like into all the Star Trek stuff. You know, like Dwight would be like really into the.
What job would Dwight have on your Star Trek? I'm guessing you would want to live on like a Federation ship. Or,
yeah.
Correct.
You'd be
what job would?
Right.
What was that?
No, go ahead. You answer. Sorry.
I was gonna think you would be security. You would just be
security, head of security.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what's the last book or movie? The book you read or movie you liked that you recommend? Or TV show?
Let me see. Let's see. Gotta look on Audible. Okay. Yeah. Bad Blood, which is the book about Theranos.
Oh my god, so good. So good.
Yeah. That was wasn't the last book I read, but I think that's like certainly if you're interested in starting a startup, I'd read that. And
I think she's a very good story founder, right? And I think the reality on the ground caught up with her.
Yeah.
I have a question. Go ahead. You had a second part.
Oh, I was gonna there's another Thinking Fast and Slow. It's another book that took a long time on Audible, but it was very interesting and sort of that was great.
Here's a question from the audience. Any code-related podcasts that you like?
I actually don't listen to code-related podcasts.
I find it very difficult, right? It's like hard to understand without any visual.
Yeah, I haven't even tried, so I might like them.
Here's a question from Andrew Glancy. What happened with Ryan Dahl and the Node community, and what do you think about Dino? Dino is Ryan Dahl's TypeScript-based Node interpreter.
Dino seems cool. I haven't actually even downloaded it or like done Hello World, but like the video I saw, I think it was the one when he introduced it, seemed awesome. Like I would love it seemed like there were a bunch of things that were kind of awkward with Node, and so and Dino seemed to like address them. I'm not sure if I can say what happened with him.
Here's a question for you. You have your full stack backpack and what's in your apartment right now, and zombies are heading towards your way. What do you grab to put in your bug out bag?
Jesus. My mask that I made.
Wait, for its utility or because you're really attached to it, something that you've sewed?
Because you never know.
Well, I'm assuming if zombies are coming now, it's because the coronavirus mutated, and so I'm thinking I need my mask.
Okay, well, here's a quick sub hot seat. Coronavirus, aerosolized or droplet based?
I don't know. I don't know. Okay. I think software engineers should stop speculating about like
medical
virology these days.
Yeah. Fair. What about you've lived in both New York and Chicago, so do you have
New York versus Chicago?
Like do you have a favorite city, A, and B, if you could give us some sub ratings about like food, entertainment, living, working, people.
Yeah. New York, Chicago, both great. I love the Bay Area of my childhood, at least. That's when I lived there. I haven't lived there as an adult, but I think I miss the Bay Area. New York is exciting. I think Chicago is very livable, has a lot to offer, and is really nice. I think I relaxed a lot when I got to Chicago, and I think New York stressed me out in ways I didn't understand when I was there. Maybe that's from like, having 4 roommates and being in my early 20s or something. But I think Chicago is like a deep breath, have some living space. So that was really nice.
All right. If you could get the answer. Oh, food, yes.
Like the city with the best food? I think the Bay Area has probably just better ingredients than either Chicago or New York, which makes me think that the food is better. Yeah.
Okay, never heard that opinion ever.
Wait,
or held that personally.
No, the Bay Area.
The Bay Area, I've never heard anybody say that. I've always heard the opposite, actually. Like the Bay Area food is terrible, but living is great.
I hear there. I've been hearing that's good. I mean, they have like, are you talking about like high end, like French Laundry and?
No, I just mean like if you get a salad somewhere, the lettuce is better, I think, in the Bay Area than in New York.
It's California, like freshness.
Yeah.
Zeke, what if you could get the answer to any question in the world? What would that question be?
Wait, say that again.
If you could get the answer to any question in the world, what would that question be?
You guys are reminding me why hot seat is hard. I hate superlative questions or like things you have to pick one thing. The answer, I think, like probably a schematic to something like cold fusion that would allow an energy.
Okay, so
source.
Helping the world, kind of. That's good. That's good. Kanye or Taylor Swift? Do you know that?
Yeah, Taylor Swift.
Joe Exotic or Carol Baskin?
Where are you getting?
Oh, you haven't watched it. I don't even know. I haven't watched it either. That was a reference to Netflix's Tiger King. I know that people are talking about it on my Twitter. What do other people think about you?
What do other people think about me?
Yeah. Or how do you want other people to think about you, and what do you think people actually think about you?
These are deep. I think that I hope people think that I hope people know that I care about other people and try to put other people first in my thinking. And I think people probably think that, but also probably think that I'm anxious. I'm not sure they think that. I always think people. No, they're not. They're not related at all. I always think people think I'm anxious, but then people often tell me I have this Zen quality about me, which makes me chuckle because I rarely feel Zen. But maybe I give that off.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you appear to be under supreme calm, but underneath underneath maybe you are
It's like
anxious,
madness.
but we cannot see that, right? Um,
Maybe. Okay.
let's see. Do you if you could be a fly on the wall any time in or anywhere in history, where would it be?
Hmm.
Hmm. Hmm. I think honestly, some early tech development, 60s, 70s, I think I would just love to sort of see these people figuring this stuff out for the first time, answering questions that are now so well established but weren't obvious. I don't have a specific time, but I think
Hmm.
like before there was a compiler, like figuring out a compiler, like how will that work before, like, yeah. And I don't know enough about computing history to have a specific one, but I think hearing those conversations would be really interesting.
Yeah, I find that whole fascinating. It's like you kind of see it in how departments formed at universities because the computer science department was like, where did it come out of, right? Did it come out of the electronics group, the math group? And oftentimes a bunch of professors would kind of get around and form this computing thing, and eventually, they called it computer science, but it came up with the growth of what was the computing field, right? Is um, things like the lambda calculus, right? It's like a mathematical thing that turns into a computing thing. The let's see, and if you could trade places with anyone for a day, who would it be?
Hmm. Well, honestly, like it's probably if I thought about this answer a little more, I'm sure I'd come to something else. But my wife's also a software engineer, and I think it'd be cool to be in her job for a day, see what type of stuff she's actually working on, like get a perspective on her team because I hear about her world from her. And
That
I
is a
wonder what
good
she would do to
because David said trade places because you got to think about now she's also taking your job. And so because you picked a software engineer, she probably wouldn't destroy your company. If you had picked like Gandhi or something, I'm not sure he knows what's going on with Nest.js.
Yeah, and Claire would probably make some improvements to my code base.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
interesting actually.
All right. Any other questions? Nimit, you have any questions or any other questions from the audience?
No, I think I just want to. I don't know how many people are left. If you made it this far, thank you. I just want to express
hanging out.
our gratitude to Zeke. Zeke, we remember the early days fondly. It was quite an adventure in there. I think you've seen almost all of the at least the iteration of Fullstack Academy, and I feel secretly I also feel happy that you've kind of experienced the other side as well, so that you've gotten like the management perspective too. And and that so I'm like, okay, good. I wish like so sometimes so it's good. But anyway, so thank you
Zeke,
for
to answer the question or to answer our question, our version of the question of what we think about you, you were an amazing mentor to so many students, and we heard that all the time. And your ideas and energy informed so much of the DNA of Fullstack early on that has propagated into the future, into now. So I think that's something that we'll always remember fondly, and that you had this like great spirit for a passion about helping others learn how to code. We did not think of you as an anxious person. That's funny. We always thought you were like a very calm and cool, and uniquely represented this idea that, you know what, everything is not right, but we can figure it out. So I think that was that's what when you went to do your startup, we were very excited for you because I think that's really the startup ethos, right? It's like, look, everything's hitting the fan, but we can figure this out. So thanks so much for joining us. It's really fun to catch up, and best of luck on your new venture.
Thank you.
And when will we know what it is?
or when are you going to do the launch?
Hopefully, the commitment I've made to the team is the 15th of April, but we'll see. It's Yeah. Follow me on Twitter, and I'll.
Oh yeah, what's your
I'll
Twitter?
retweet it. It's Zeke Nierenberg, which is easy to spell and easy to say. Z at ZekeNierenberg.
Okay, let me. You putting that banner?
No, I'm not. Just making sure that it's actually my handle.
Okay, this.
Yep.
All right, Zeke.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Nice.
All right, and comment from Andrew. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for joining, Andrew. And
Stay safe.
yeah. And I think, yeah, great talking to you. And next time, when all this stuff changes, next time you're in New York or next time we're in Chicago, it'd be great to meet in person.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Catch all of you later. See you soon.
All right. Bye.